Tune in as we give flowers to Black men and women making waves in the audio industry. I'm your host, Sidney Evans, and this is Beyond the Threshold. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Threshold. I'm your host, Sidney Evans, an award-winning audio editor and producer. For those of you who don't know, on this show, I interview Black men and women working in the audio industry, highlighting the lessons and experiences it takes to achieve success in the field. We got another great episode in store for today. I know you all are used to me making a reference to a new guest being someone that was recommended by a previous guest. This was not the case for this particular episode. I actually made a LinkedIn post just to use my network to help me identify some more diverse people in some different areas. I know it's been kind of podcast heavy so far in general for a majority of the episodes, and there's an aspect of that in this episode, but I do want to continue to venture out and have people in some other lanes in audio, just so it's a little something for everybody. We don't want to narrow it down too much. Originally, we were supposed to record this a couple weeks ago, but we weren't able to do it. So I'm glad to be able to have him on this particular episode, just to give you a little bit of a background on him. He has almost 20 years of experience in audio and video production, and he began his career in radio before moving into television, working in various roles, including in-studio production, post-production, and as a producer. He later expanded into kids media as an award-winning podcast producer. And he's also a very talented voiceover artist, working with brands such as Delta, Amazon, iHeartMedia, and Walmart, just to name a few. In 2023, he was nominated for Male Voiceover Talent of the Year by the One Voice Award. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Torran Wakefield-Thompson to the show. Appreciate you coming on, man.
Hey, thanks, Sidney. Appreciate you having me on. And I'm glad we finally got a chance to, our schedules match up to do this. Holidays are pretty crazy.
Well, I'm glad we're back into the flow of post-holiday lives, and I'm back into the flow of recording and releasing episodes for the pod.
Mm-hmm.
If you are listening, as I mentioned when we first hopped on off camera, I'm sure you can hear the range and the depth in his voice. So it only makes sense for him to have made his way into doing voiceover, and we're definitely going to touch on that aspect. But just to start off, kind of want to just jump into it. Just give us a little bit of background about like where you grew up, your interests in your younger years, and like the career path that you end up pursuing. Is it something that was calculated from the beginning? Was it something that kind of fell in your lap, or was it kind of a gradual process for you? Can you break that down for us?
Yeah. Whenever I look back at, my younger years and how I kind of got into doing, this audio visual field and, strictly now more audio, it didn't really hit me until that I thought like, this is what I want to do, until I was like my second or third year in college. But when I look back at my childhood, it was always there, And so like, I remember, and I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, when I think I was like 11, 12 years old. One of my big items for Christmas that I wanted was like this Tyco video camera to start recording stuff and like doing home movies. Before that, when I was even younger than that, one of my big items that I wanted was a Talkboy from, Home Alone 2, the little recorder thing that he had. Like that was a big thing that I wanted, and I ended up getting both of those for Christmas that year. And I was always playing with those and recording stuff with it. But that's kind of where it started, but I didn't really realize that's going to be my eventual career path. I was just having fun and playing around with all that stuff. And it wasn't until, I think like my junior year or like my sophomore year in college that I kind of fell into it. And I was like, this is what brings me joy. Like creating something, like having an idea or a thought, putting it down on paper, and then creating something from it in an audio visual space so that someone can interact with that piece of media and have feelings of emotion from it, which just started off as a thought for me. But now I'm creating something that people either have an emotional response to it, whether they're happy or sad or angry or whatever it is, whatever the intent that I'm trying to get them to feel, like they feel something from it. Like that I always thought that was very, very cool and inspiring to do. And so, yeah, that's kind of where it started for me. And so I'm originally from Florida, from Tampa, and I went to the University of South Florida. So that's where I kind of, I majored in mass communications, the emphasis, a focus on television production. And so I did all that stuff there, and while I was there, I had, I was doing one of my production classes. I think someone asked me to voice something that they were doing a project for. They didn't want to do it because they didn't like the sound of their voice. But like, Torran, how about you do it? And I was like, all right, cool. So I did it, didn't really think nothing about it. But the instructor of the class heard me and she was like, you know what? I think you should look into doing voiceover work. And I was like, really? And she was just like, yeah, you have like a good sound. And she's someone that, when I hold in high regard as an instructor and someone who has had lots of years in the business and audio and visual. She had an extensive resume. Obviously, she's teaching now. And so I kind of had a quick talk with her about it after class. And she gave me a couple things to do. One of them was to talk to another adjunct professor who did VO. And from there, I kind of thought like, you know what, this can be something I could pursue after college a little bit, because that was like my last semester when she kind of said that. And so, yeah, so I started pursuing it a little bit after college, and I just did some Googling. I found like a voice coach that I started going to, that basically he invited us, a small group of people, to come to a place to read copy, break down how voiceover works, how to interpret copy, understanding a writer's intention and how to get that to, how to nail that so that when you deliver the copy, the script, the commercial, whatever it is, that the audience receives that intention. And then he told me like, I definitely see a future for you in this too. And so I started seeing him for more classes. And then, it's a journey. It's a long thing. It definitely isn't something that, I got into knowing that I'm just going to like start killing this in like a couple months. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
That's something that he even said too, so that was my first coach that I started seeing down in Sarasota, Florida. And then I just kept at it. And then I saw another coach, fine-tuned skills. And then I got to a point where, I was doing research and all that stuff during that time, and just kind of kept going on and on with that on the side while I was doing television, like production stuff. So I was also working at the local PBS station in Tampa, doing a little bit of everything there, like, camera, graphics, building sets and stuff. Like I was doing a little bit of everything, lighting. And I worked at Home Shopping Network, which was across the bay, and the St. Pete. And I did a lot of lighting and set design kind of stuff there, just in the field, like, and gaining different experiences. Because one of the things I always wanted to do, because my ultimate goal when I was in college was to be a producer. And so I've always felt like, if I'm going to be a producer, I want to know all these different positions, all these different roles that people play. I want to be able to know exactly what it entails to do them. Since if I'm going to be a producer, I'm going to have to tell somebody I want this done or need that done, but I know what it takes or have some inkling of what it takes to get it done. So that way I know where they're coming from when they say like, this can happen, but, or think about this. Like I'm already kind of a little bit of ahead because I've kind of done that a little bit already. Right. So I was doing that, VO, as I was doing all this television production stuff. And then at a certain point, one of my best buddies, shout out to my buddy Ephraim Kirkwood. He is a guy that I known in college. We did a lot of great projects together. He moved to New York, and he's a video editor. And he was he really needed a roommate. That struggle in New York when you first get there.
Right.
And he was like, I was like, I'm not ready yet. Let me save up some more money, and then like I'll come up there. And I figure I can pursue everything I want to do in VO along with producing. And then so I made the move up to New York.
One thing that stood out to me a couple times when you were kind of telling your stories, that first off, when you were younger and beginning to like take an interest in just telling stories and all that, you mentioned that the process from writing something down to executing it to people consuming it. So when you were younger, did you like, because sometimes when you're that age, you don't really like know the actual process. You're kind of just winging things. So maybe you just start shooting or maybe have an outline or whatever. But were you actually like writing things down, like kind of doing it the way it should be done, like getting something on paper? I don't know if you thought of it as a script when you're a young kid. You were just, okay, I have a structure for what I'm doing, or was it kind of you just start creating, just see what comes of it and kind of putting it together based off that?
Yeah, it's the latter. I was just like doing whatever, but the idea of me crafting and writing something down didn't come till later. But like the emphasis or like the genesis of what this idea of getting involved in this medium was that at a young age. But yeah, I was just like doing all kinds of randomness. And actually it's kind of funny because I mentioned the Talk Boy, you know, and you know, for those that are listening that don't know what a Talk Boy is, if you've seen Home Alone 2, then if you're younger, then you know what it is. It's just like a recorder, handheld recorder that you press play with cassette tapes, and you can record anything with a little mic that's attached to it. But so I still have a lot of those tapes, those cassette tapes. They're in my old bedroom, my parents' house. And so, and actually as we record this, I'm at my parents' house, you know? And so, so I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and they're like, you should definitely try to preserve those, you know, because over time, like those tapes are maybe gonna like, you know, lose their quality and you may lose those recordings. And so maybe about like 2 weeks ago or so, while I was here, I still have that Talk Boy. I found some batteries, put it in, and I started going through these tapes and I was listening to them. A 9-year-old Torran, 8-year-old Torran, and I was just, you know, just saying a bunch of stupid stuff. Like, like, you know, you can only imagine, like, and it's really cool to hear it, because when now, at the age that I'm at now, older, and I see like young kids and my little nephews, and I see what they're doing and how wild and crazy and zany they are, and I'm thinking like, man, I was never like that crazy. I was never like that. And I go back and listen to these tapes, like, yeah, I was pretty wild. I was pretty crazy.
Oh yeah, I mean, kids are called kids for a reason.
Exactly,
they're gonna be kids.
Yeah, but when you're a kid though, you don't think about it. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
But when you're an adult now and you go back and listen to that stuff, like it was definitely going in through a 90s time capsule, listening to those tapes, and it was very, very cool. And I'm glad I still saved them and had them. And there's actually you know, recordings on there that I guess I was just like recording stuff, like any random thing I would just press and record on. There's a audio of me and my stepdad like building a model car. I remember us building a model car together. He got me a model, we were building it together, and there's like audio of me and him talking and my super high pitched voice at that time. And then and there's also recordings that like I have of family members that are no longer with us, you know what I mean, that I ended up discovering, which was a really, really cool thing. My grandmother's voice was on there, my uncle, you know, and I shared that with the family, you know what I mean? And that was very, very, probably telling too much. There were actually like phone conversations that like, you know, back then, you know, this house phone, you just pick up the phone and like, you can hear who's talking on the other line in the house. Like, you know what I'm saying? Right. So like, I'm in my bedroom just being a little sneaky with my Talk Boy, and I'm just picking up the phone and I'm just pressing record, and they didn't even know I was doing it, you know, now. And so, yeah, there's like phone conversations that like, you know, I recorded with family members. They're no longer with us, and it was just really cool to hear their voice, you know? And so I was doing like a little bit of everything with that Talk Boy. And so yeah, I didn't write anything down. It was just me just pressing record and seeing what happens.
Yeah, I got you. It's funny you actually tell that story, because I was talking to my dad. So we had a death in the family. Like his aunt passed. She was like 85 years old. Like, obviously death in any form is sad. You have the memories, the person's no longer here. But we were just having a conversation. He was kind of reflecting, like kind of telling stories about from his childhood and involving her. And he grew up in a house with a lot of people.
Yeah.
So her funeral is Friday, and I know a lot of families going to be there. There's going to be a lot of, you know, we're gonna, you know,
catching
how
up
we do as Black people.
Yeah.
It starts off, you know, celebrating someone's life, but then it turns into kind of like a family reunion.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was actually, I said it kind of jokingly. My dad, I was like, I know some interesting stories are gonna be told. Like, I should bring my equipment and record it.
Yeah. And
then I actually got off the phone. I was like, I might actually do it.
You should, man.
Because, you know, obviously, like, you want to use your talent as, you know, to make money and have a career. But, you know, when you have that type of skill set and it's something that you could, you know, put together for your family, for everybody to document and put it together and polish it and presented to the family. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I had a similar thought, man. I had a similar thought maybe like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when visiting family. Look, 'cause a lot of my family on my mom's side, they live in Jacksonville, Florida. And so we would go down there sometime. And last year was like a tough year for us. We had some deaths in the family as well. And then I'd be thinking about how, a lot of these stories I've heard throughout my years of living when I was young, like these stories are only lasting through memory from the younger generation, right? Because a lot of these stories are dying along with them. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so I said a similar thought of like, you know what, maybe I should like do this to like have a recording of all of these stories that I've heard from my mom and her sisters and her brothers that they laugh about and just have a good time talking, like just recording it. You know what I mean? And it's still maybe something I do, but yeah, we're thinking very, very alike in that sense. Yeah.
Right. Like I try to like, and I credit my girlfriend to always kind of make me think of like, prior, we just get so much into like the hustle and making money part of it. We don't really think about how we can use our skills to like do things for our family, create memories, just use it in other ways where it's not, you don't have the pressure or the expectation was like, okay, it has to do this or it wasn't worth it.
It's a passion.
It's great to just do passion things and be creative and have no expectation. I feel like we can get a lot of fulfillment out of that.
Definitely.
But to jump back to kind of keep the story going, you were making a transition to New York, and I want you to keep in mind, I want you to kind of go ahead and tell that story. But you did mention that like all the experience you had doing multiple different things in regards to production, not only from an audio, but from a video standpoint, sets and all that. And I would think that was a thing that became valuable to you once you get to New York, because there's a lot of, you just don't have one skill set. You were like, if I don't get an opportunity in this, like, what am I going to do? You kind of can go a whole bunch of different lanes and go into a big city like New York. I would think in your mind, you're like, I'm young, like there's a lot of opportunity ahead of me, and you never really know what's going to take you. So you kind of take us through that?
Yeah. So, when I was in Tampa, I had a lot of experience doing, like set design, lighting, camera, even did like some technical directing, and control rooms for productions. So I did a little bit of everything. So when I moved to New York, my goal was to like, grow as a producer and also still do voiceover stuff, But when I went there, I had a gig as a video editor at a small production company. It was like a guy trying to start up a production company. He just had like a couple people, and I was one of the video editors. He was an editor and I was like the only one, like an assistant editor kind of position. And then I had a paid internship at Viacom with MTV. So MTV at that point they weren't really focusing on music like they are today, but I think it was like the start of that. But they did have like a division of MTV called MTV World, which still did focus on music, but it was like music from artists all over the world, and it was only online. So I did a lot of field production, shoots, video editing, and stuff like that there with them. But I was thinking like that stuff is not permanent. It's not, like at the end of the summer, like what am I going to do? Like when this ends, But knowing I have that skill set of all those things that I've done in Tampa, like it opens the door for me to be open to like any and everything, And so I was open to, I remember one of the things I was open to was, so when I was down here, I worked a Tampa Bay Buccaneers football game just as like a guy that just was like behind the camera guy, like coiling cable, like, you know what I mean? So like you see, if you watch sporting events, there's always a guy running up and down with like, camera. There's always a guy behind him with cable. So I did that at a Buccaneers game once. It was a cool experience to be on the sidelines during the NFL game. That was really, really cool.
You got to be careful down there during the football game. Sure. They get ran over.
Yeah, you got to be careful. Always got to have your head on a swivel. You know what I mean? Right. And then also make sure the wire doesn't trip over the cheerleaders. That was like a big fear of mine.
Gotcha.
And so, but anyway, so I did that, and I was open to doing that in New York for Jets and Giants games, even though it's going to be really, really cold. I was like, whatever. Right. I have that skill set. I could do that. is there anywhere I can go to like help do set design, do lighting, some of these shows, whatever. Just work my network of people. My friend Ephraim, like, who does he know? Because I was going to also maybe get a position where he worked at a production company who, they were a video production company that edited documentaries and TV shows and stuff, and like working in like the equipment rental part of that company, doing something there, whatever to get my foot in the door to be able to work my way up to like get into a producer position and still be able to allow me to whatever, do VO, pay rent or whatever. But but my background from college was all in like news production for the most part. And so, and working at the PBS station in Tampa, like I had that background. And so I worked those connections to be able to land a position at PBS in New York at WNET for PBS NewsHour Weekend. They were just starting this new news program on the weekends. And so I kind of worked those connections to get in there as like I think I started off there like as a PA / like research assistant. And and I had a lot of that background of producing for news, fact checking, interviewing, pre-interviewing. I had that background already. And so being able to do that, and they hired me because of my production background too, because they needed someone to work a mini control room for guests to do basically what they call uplinks, when they don't really do them that much anymore. But now everyone's like via Zoom or Skype or something. But before the pandemic, you had to actually go to a studio and they would uplink via satellite to a studio. And they wanted me to run that whole thing because they knew I had that background. So
so that's how they did remote stuff back then.
Yeah, exactly. Before like Zoom and all that kind of stuff, you had to go to a studio.
Okay, that makes sense, because I feel like from a political standpoint, like in like politics or I don't know, public media, like they were kind of the ones doing it, doing people from like, different parts of the country and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I would do that when I worked at the PBS station in Tampa. So they had like an insert studio for people to do via satellite about any topic, any person that was needed to talk to that was in Tampa. They'd send them to that station, and then I would just run the camera, talk to the people in the control room, fix the audio and all that kind of stuff. So they were doing something similar to that for PBS NewsHour Weekend, but just for PBS NewsHour, the main program that was based out of DC. Because there's a lot of people, influential people in New York, they want to be able to hop on a phone call real quick. Hey, we want this person in the studio touring. Can you set that up? And I would just do that for them. And and of course, along with that, just doing a lot of research and PAing for other producers and all that. And so, so that background helped to be able to land that job. And that was like my first full-time job in New York, kept me in New York to be able to pursue all these other things. And and I was there for 5.5 years, and I left there as broadcast producer at PBS NewsHour Weekend. So, and it was a great experience, definitely an education, learning about the world and politics, foreign affairs, and I got to travel a lot across the country, doing stuff there. And, I really love my time. It sucked to have to work every weekend. I'm not gonna lie about that, but it definitely was a great experience. Love public media. And so I don't think I've ever stopped working for public media ever since I started working at, WEDU in Tampa at PBS. And so even still now I do like voiceovers for a couple stations. So
it's full circle.
Yeah, exactly. It is. I started there as an intern in 2007, I want to say, at PBS in Tampa. And I'm still been working for them in some capacity, even now, And so, so that's kind of how the different skill sets that I have were able to land me a full-time job, doing that for PBS NewsHour Weekend. And of course, continue to learn and produce my own pieces there and grow to become like an influential person that people counted on to get the show on the air and to time out the show, to make sure every show is 26:46, 0 frames. They came to me for the timing of everything. And so all that skill set definitely helps to do anything else I want to do outside of that.
Okay, so where are you at in your like voiceover career at this time while you're doing this like full-time job?
Yeah. So VO is what I do full time now. So
I'm talking about at that time. At that time.
Yeah. At that time, it was just something I was doing kind of like on the side. There was like a point in time when I was at NewsHour where I couldn't even remember the last time I got behind a mic. Because I was just so, when I first moved to New York, I was just so like, all right, I got to find out how can I pay my rent? How can I, survive here? And then when I got the NewsHour thing, it's like, okay, now I got to show them that I'm worthy of this. I can do this. Like, if you know how kind of like, and especially me, like I'm the only, like one of 2 black people, like on the whole department of NewsHour Weekend. I'm the only black male, right? So this thing where like you feel like you got to show people you belong here, like, you know what I mean? And that you're dependable and all this stuff.
Right.
So like,
you don't want to like, you kind of want to solidify your spot before you start saying like, okay, this is the other hustle.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Diverting your attention.
Yeah, I want to solidify my spot there, let people know they can count on me and all that stuff. And I did that. And people loved me there. And I was a great resource for the team for whatever we did. And then it was around like 2016, I was like, okay. It was like around this time, 2016, I was like, all right, this is the year where like, I got to get back into this. And that's where, I took another voiceover class and got the ball rolling again. And which led me to taking a class with a guy named Ed Lewis, who's like a real good friend of mine to this day. And I took a 5-week class with him, and he recommended me to someone else, a lady named Karen Murray, another great coach. And that kind of got the ball rolling to like, yeah, I'm in it again. I'm refreshing these tools. I'm refining my skill set with voiceover. And then she recommended me to another studio that I could work with that needed like random voices for like these e-learning projects. And those people were really influential into like my journey in voiceover.
Okay, you're picking up steam.
Yeah.
So I know one thing that I know you mentioned, you just talk about these VO coaches. It's just like every time you want to go to the next level, you know what I'm saying? Like you're introduced, it's an aspect of like, network and building relationships. Can you kind of talk about that within the VO industry and like why it's so different from other roles? Because like in other, like obviously they have coaches for a lot of areas, but it's not like it's something you decide to do on your own. But it sounds like from VO, it's like, no, if you want to make it, you got to get a coach. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, coaches is where all your experience, not all your experience, but a lot of your experience comes from, because they tell you, the stuff that you don't know. You don't know. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so, and it's a performance, so like if you're, if I want to get to be Patrick Mahomes has coaches, like, you know what I mean? To help him get to where he's at now. Or if you're, or keeping it in the acting realm, if you're, Denzel or somebody, Brad Pitt or somebody, like they've had acting coaches, right? That's where you learn to fine tune your skills, gain new skills, focus on what to practice to get better at. And it never stops, And so even still to this day, like I take coaching, and because in the industry, there are trends and those trends change over time. Like these voice buyers, advertising companies, production companies, marketing people, they want a certain sound, and you can't do the same sound you were doing like 10 years ago because things change. And so you go to coaching that will help you get better at the new sound, what these people are looking for their product, And so like one of the newer ones is this kind of like, I forgot what he called it. It's like a distracted kind of read. Because nowadays everyone's scrolling on their phone for like TikTok and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. And it's like they're looking at their phone, but they're talking to you, but they're not really paying attention. So a lot of advertisers like that kind of read, like a distracted kind of read, where it's kind of like if the brand is, I don't know, let's say it's like it's Snapple or something like that. And it's like, drink Snapple. It's sugar-free and good for you. It's kind of like very, very like late. It's kind of like down. It's not like Snapple. It's sugar-free and good for you. It's not like that.
Oh yeah.
Like,
it's not like you're introduced, like it's a commercial for like the Grammys or something.
Yeah,
like,
they want it to be very, very relatable, very conversational, and you know what I mean? And that's kind of what they look for. But you only know that through coaching. And then when you know that's what they're looking for, it's like, okay, how can I get out of this range and get to more of this range? Like, you know what I mean? And so you take coaching to do that. And when I was starting out doing coaching, I'm just learning all the basics, like, you know what I mean? About this industry. I mean, learning from performance stuff and learning etiquette when going to a studio. And so now the coaching, I still do it, but I'm not learning all the basic stuff anymore. I got that stuff down packed. Things have changed.
Learning the trends.
Yeah, now I'm learning trends. And now I'm learning even about like different technology that comes out. Because being in this business, the technology changes. Like, you know what I mean? And certain workflows you have can be different with the new technology, and some of that coaching isn't necessarily performative or performance. It's just workflow stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Some of it's business stuff. Like, you know what I mean? And so there's a whole voiceover conference that's all about the business of voiceover. It's not even about performance. Like, you know what I mean? And that's still coaching, And so that's why it's so important to have coaching and to find good coaches. And when people do reach out to me, and they are interested in getting into VO and I tell them, I have like a little document that I send them because I get hit up a lot about it. I was like, I got to streamline this a little bit. And then,
Right.
But they see a little bit of all that. And then I have a conversation with them and I kind of tell them that. And because, and they're just beginning, they just have an idea about it because they only think just the performative stuff of it. But I tell them all this other stuff you got to think about too. And they're just kind of like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I didn't think about, that makes sense too, And so, yeah, coaching, and I've had some great ones along the way. I had mentioned like Ed Lewis and Karen Murray, the two coaches I had at first in New York, and that network that I made with them was great. Because like I said, Ed introduced me to Karen, and Karen introduced me to this other studio that I've been working with for a long time, still to this day. And they've seen me grow in my progression throughout my career as well. And through networking, going to conferences, I met and talking to other voice talent, I've met other coaches and I worked with, and depending on the genres that I want to try to get into, I worked with coaches in those genres, and that's where more learning comes in. And it's just, it doesn't stop, and it just makes you become a better, well-rounded talent and being very versatile to a production company or whoever hires you.
Okay, cool. The aspect of the coach you were talking about when you mentioned like, because I'll just speak from my experience. For me, when I got into Audit, it was purely from like a technical and production aspect.
Yeah.
Like that was the draw. That was the thing that I couldn't let go. That I couldn't stop thinking about. So I was like, I got to pursue this. And I would assume this is, it's an assumption that this is pretty similar in any field or discipline that somebody's in, but it probably, for a lot of people or people who kind of think like me or are creative, that's how you start off.
Yeah.
And then once you decide you want to make a living off of it, then you got to consider the business part of it and all this other stuff. And it's just like, sometimes it could kind of take sometimes it could take something away from the purity of just, why you got into it. And that can be tough to navigate. Cause I kind of feel like I went from, like I said, like enjoying the production part of it, taking an interest in it and wanting to pursue it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, this is going to be a career. And then getting introduced to the business aspect of it. And you're like, okay, that's cool. You kind of jump into it. And then you find all the nuances and everything it entails. And then it kind of takes something away from it. And then you kind of start to withdraw from it a little bit.
Yeah, that happens a lot of people.
Kind of lose it. And then you get to a certain point where you're just like, man, if I'm going to do it all the way, I got to dive just as much into the business aspect of it as the creative. And then once you accept that, then I feel like you can, that could be the catalyst for you really thriving. So
Exactly.
I'm glad you touched on that, because you can't, if you want to be good at anything, like you gotta cover all the bases. You gotta be well versed in all aspects. And as hard as it may be to accept, that's just the reality of things. So I did want to mention that.
Yeah, it's a good point. And that's where I say, like, why I just mentioned the coaching, because there are business coaches out there and people that I've worked with and talked to and it's still something today that, like, I'm working through, like, that whole business side of it too. Like, I got into it for the passion of doing voiceover, not for the passion of, like, I just like business. Right. Business just comes along with it if you want to do that. So you got to put together a team, have people you rely on to talk to about these things so that you can thrive and continue to do, your main goal, which was, like, to perform and do, for me, voiceover or whatever it is that you want to do.
Okay. So, absolutely. All right. So, to kind of keep it moving, can you kind of touch on how you kind of made the transition, like, to doing the kids media and being a podcast producer, and then also, like, you got some big brands on here that you did voiceover from. So like how once you start really elevating and start working with these bigger brands, not only was what that experience was like, but can you talk about like the demand and how quickly they want things to turn around and get a touch a little bit, because I always want to touch on this a little bit, like the like the money portion of it, like how that is structured, how that is presented in the voiceover world. For those who may know, because I'm curious myself, so I'm sure the listeners are.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. So, all right, let me start off with the kids media portion of that. So, when I was working at NewsHour, and I've always been a creative person. Like I said, with the stuff that I was doing when I was a kid, with the video camera and the talk boy, like that's always been my spirit. So when I was at NewsHour working in news, it's a less of a creative medium. And so, and at a certain point, like I said, working every weekend, wasn't the coolest thing, when you're, in your 20s, early 30s, and your social life does take a hit.
Right.
And then on top of that, it's just like the news, it's not a lot of good news you're sharing to the world. It's a lot of, doom and gloom and death and what's wrong with the world, And
Right.
over time, that does, for me, it does take a toll on you, mental health wise, and then like the immediacy of it, the fact that it's 24/7, doesn't stop, and to wake up in the morning, I'm like, all right, what happened while I was sleeping that I got to deal with today? Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so, and a couple other things that I just felt like, like it's time to make a move, and didn't know what that was, right? But I wanted to be something more creative and not necessarily in news, and where I didn't have to work every weekend.
Right.
And then, I found this position on LinkedIn, actually, from this company called Penna. It was, it's still around. I say was because I'm not there anymore, but it's an audio focused platform for kids that has like podcasts, stories, like all kinds of creative things, all audio only, for kids. And so when I first saw it, I was kind of like, I could send them like my VO pitch, just market them or find out who works there and give them that. But actually it sounds like a cool job to have, to be a podcast producer, for them. So I just applied to it as a podcast producer, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna give them the VO thing. And then literally the next day, she emailed me and was interested, to talk to me. And then we set up an interview and had the interview. And then, and I kept it real with her. This is Amy, who she ended up hiring me eventually, but I kept it real with her. I was like, yeah, I still don't want to do news anymore. And I don't want to forgive you. And then, and she was really cool, but she actually didn't hire me. She actually hired someone else,
Really?
And so but she liked me though. She liked me, and she was like, there could be another producer position opening by the end of the year. Like, stay in touch, And so I'm always like, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, And so that's how I operate still to this day. And so I kept in touch with her. And then, and then she wanted to talk to me again, like 2 months later. She was like, you want to come in again for another conversation? So I came in, and it was less of an interview, and it was more of just like a conversation. And then she hired me like a week or two later, And so, and she gave me some cool projects to do. So I really liked working there. It was like I said, people think of podcasts for kids. They're like, what's a podcast for a kid? And I was like, well, it's funny because it could be anything, like, you know what I mean? And so we literally did all kinds of like, things that were fun for kids. So one of the shows that I did was, it was a daily podcast. They were really short. They're like a little over a minute. They were just like jokes. So it was two characters that went back and forth. They just told like jokes back and forth. They're like dad jokes. But to kids, they never really heard these before. They're hilarious. And even still, like, they were hilarious because the two actors, Lori Himes and Billy Bob Thompson, great actors.
So they did like kids' voices?
No, they were just themselves. They just played characters.
Okay.
Yeah, they just played characters.
Okay.
And so the characters, so one of the struggles that I had was when we were developing the show, was like, what do we call the show? And what names do we give these characters? Like, and that's always like, it's always like the most frustrating part, but also the most fun part is the beginning of developing something, And so I was like, I was like, that's a struggle of mine. I'm trying to do all this other stuff. I'm like, what do I call this show and what do I call the characters? It just hit me one day. I was on the subway. I was on the train one day, And
that's how it always happens.
Yeah.
Like, look, do not, like, when you gotta go. Sometimes the spark hits you when you're doing other things.
Exactly.
Like you may see a poster or somebody. You might have met somebody. They had and
it triggers something.
The spark, it triggers, and then it just comes.
Yeah, like
that's how you know.
I was just sitting on the train,
thing.
just chilling. I was just like, it was a crowded train. I was just sitting there, and I had a thought, and I was like, what can I call this? And I thought it was like, because the show, they do a lot of puns in the show too. They do a lot of puns. And we haven't did any episodes. It's all like a couple like rough drafts we did. And these two were really funny. And they did a lot of puns going off of each other and everything. And it's a funny show. So I was like, how about I just call it Hilarious? Everyday Jokes with Hillary and Larry. Play on the words. And like, yeah. And so
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
So then, and it kills two birds with one stone. The name of the show and the name of the characters. And I remember I thought I'd go to my boss, Amy, and I tell her about it. And like, I got it, the name of the show and the characters. And I told her about it. I thought she was going to be over the moon, like, oh, Torran, that's great. She was like, what else you got? And I was like, really? I was like, oh, I didn't really have anything else because I thought that was so great. And then, so she asked me to brainstorm a little bit more. And then she took it to the marketing team. I think the marketing team loved it a lot. And so she comes back to me and is like, yeah, we're going to go with Hilarious Everyday Jokes with Harry and Larry. And I was like, oh, thank God, because I don't have anything else. And so, but that was a fun show. Still to this day, the actress on the show, Lori Himes, she emails me every once in a while and was like, that's the most funniest show I've ever done. Like, if you ever, at some point, that show comes back and you produce it, Torran, like, let me know. Like, it's the most fun I've ever had. And did a daily trivia show. There was a little bit, that was like 5 minutes episodes where we just did random trivia about things that the kids would like, about music, video games, TV shows, all kinds of things we just did trivia on, like, and it was all funny with sound effects and things like that. And we did kit testing for all these shows too. So I remember when we did the kit testing for trivia, we went to a school in like Midtown Manhattan and worked with like this research group that did like the testing, that conducted the testing. And I'm just there just kind of observing and watching. Like, they don't know exactly who I am. Like, I'm the guy that produced it because they don't want it to be like kind of biased, to not say anything. They want them to say what they truly think. And I feel like it's not hard to tell kids to say what they truly think about something.
Oh, yeah.
So
not at all.
I'm just observing and watching and just watching them like dance to the theme song of the show and being really into it, whether they got something right or like wrong, or if they got all 5 right. It was like really cool. And I went back to the office and told people, like, yeah, we got something here. Like, this show is good. And so both of those shows won like Parents' Choice like awards for those shows. But my favorite show that I did there, and I did so many others, but like, was a show called Hero Hotel, which was like it was based off a graphic novel. And so we turned this graphic novel into a podcast. And basically what it's about, it's about this kid, 10-year-old kid named Chet. He is not a bad kid, but he ends up finding himself in like a situation where he gets in trouble like a lot. And his mom sends him to live with his grandmother, who owns a hotel for superheroes on this place called Hero Beach. And so he goes to spend the summer there, and all these superheroes are there. And the superheroes are there because they're on vacation. So they're not really superheroes there. Like,
they're not in superhero.
Yeah, they're not in superhero
form.
mode. Like, Like, they still dress like superheroes, they still are, but they're not, right? And so they act like divas and they need things or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And so it's kind of up to him to kind of like be the person to save the day when like bad guys come and all these hijinks happen. And then he has a pet cat who ends up getting superpowers, who's like the funnest character on the show. And that was a real challenge because like all these were a real challenge because my background wasn't in kids media. It was in producing. And that's what Amy told me when she hired me. She was like, I can tell from talking to you and your background that you know how to produce stuff and you know how to produce multiple things at a time. The kids media part, we have a lot of people here that have that background. We can help you with that. And you will learn that along the way, like on the job training with how to connect with kids more with your media and with your tone and especially with this, there's a lot of jokes and stuff that we write. What's sensitive, what can we joke about, what we can't, and all that kind of how to connect to kids more. We'll work with you on that. But I just need someone that can manage these projects. And during my time there, I definitely got it. Like, we worked with also a consultant that also helped as well with connecting to kids and all that stuff. And so, but throughout making Hero Hotel, a lot of that was like, there's a lot of stuff in that show that's improv. And it's very funny because I let the actors do what they do. Like, as being a voice actor, but also being producing this, I'm just like, and the funny thing too about this too was when we were first starting this show, we had a meeting about it they had already contacted a voice director / casting director to work on this show. And it was Ed Lewis, who I worked with as like, for his coaching. So now we're working together on this show. And so I know how he works, how he goes about handling his business. So we worked well together. Some people say he's kind of a bit of a character, but I can manage it, and it was fine. And so I let a lot of the actors just kind of ad-lib. They had an idea that was funny, like, let's do it. As long as the story is still like, good, let's try something new, let's try something funny. And the creator was also very open to that and would change stuff on the fly, which could be a headache for a lot of people, but like, I feel like it made the show better. Whatever, I'll just take notes and make sure it fits in the show correctly. And it was a really, really fun show. And it had a narrator in that show. So a lot of the characters are spoofed off of like actual superheroes. So instead of like, Black Widow, there's like Arachna Lady or something like that. There's like a
Gotcha.
a Spider-Man spoof, exactly. So so Stan Lee, who created Marvel and all this, there's like a Stan Lee character in that universe, and the creator calls him, he's Stanley L. Jackson is his name. And so it's this guy that we found that really sounds like Samuel L. Jackson. And he's the narrator of this whole thing. And so he's kind of like, is this character Nick Cage, I believe? Not Nick Cage, what am I thinking of? Nick Fury. Nick Fury is the character that Samuel L. Jackson plays in the Marvel universe. So he's kind of like a spin-off of that, and also Stan Lee. But he's like a really funny narrator. It's like a really, really fun show. And so I spent a lot of time doing that kind of stuff there, and also did even some Choose Your Own Adventure kind of podcasts, which speaking to the app that we have, and then it decides which way you go on the story, which was very fun and intricate as well. And yeah, that was a really fun time. So I kind of made that transition just because, trying to do something more creative, get out of the doom and gloom of news, and to not work every weekend anymore.
Yeah, I'm sure that not only was it more creative, it was like good for your spirit, man. That's something
definitely.
like more pure and innocent, and
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying. I'm sure you probably like going into work, like the way you felt was probably way different than going into
the outside world didn't matter as much as it depended on my job. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, right.
So like I said, I had to wake up every morning, like what happened overseas, like, in the Middle East that we got to report about today, or like the France elections, like, what's going on there, like, you know what I mean? Like whatever happened outside world didn't matter to what I had to do when I went in that day, like, you know what I mean? And of course, another big reason there was I made that switch to go there, because it's definitely voiceover adjacent, right? So I had a chance to play certain characters and stuff on some of these shows that I was producing, or some other producers, they wanted to needed a character for something they were producing, and they would ask me, we want to play this character, I need someone to play a scientist or something like that. I was like, yeah, like I would do it. So I got a chance to work on doing like some character stuff in voiceover, and voice other stuff like that. So, so I definitely got to, do my passion as well as have like a full-time job. And then, so that's kind of that story.
Okay, so yeah, that's cool, man. I've actually, before we move on, when I was working at Frequency Media, like 2 jobs ago, we did a show called Once Upon a Playtime. It was just like emphasizing the aspects of play and how it's important for like development of kids.
Yeah,
and we had some pretty well-known people on there who kind of talked about how, like, some people out here, like, they discover early on like what they want to do, and they kind of just do it, their whole life. So like parent, the emphasis of parents allowing their kids to be creative and not kind of constraining them, and let them be open-minded and try different things. And like one kid this one guy, I forgot his name, but he's like this like renowned Lego artist who
oh wow,
he's like the Da Vinci of like Lego art or whatever. And obviously that's something that you get introduced to as a kid. I cannot remember his name. But yeah, just like it was a different level of satisfaction. Like when we worked on that and I heard the end result, I was just like, man, I don't know, like doing stuff for adults and doing stuff for kids, it just gives you a different feeling.
Yeah, it's
like
definitely
I feel like
different.
you're making more of a contribution to something greater. So
yeah,
I can definitely attest to that.
especially during the pandemic, like, you know what I mean? Because there were a lot of things that parents and teachers were trying to figure out to occupy kids' time and keep them entertained. You know what I mean? And a lot of them discovered, our app, during the pandemic. And so they would put that on. And also they used to always and maybe they still do, they still focus on less screen time. Cause you can just put that on and just let it go. You're not focused on the iPad or whatever, And so, and I had friends that had kids that would listen to some of these shows and they're like, yeah, I see my kid just trying to picture the images in their head. You know what I mean, as what's happening, especially with Hero Hotel, because a lot of zany, crazy stuff happening in that show that they're trying to figure out how it looks to them in their head. And even talking about the show and developing it, with the sound designer, we would talk about aspects of the hotel, and I kind of got an idea of how he thought it looked like based on our conversations and some of the sound effects he would put in there, you know what I mean? And so we would always have those conversations. It was always fun conversations to have. And I would always tell them, based on our meeting that we had before we, selected that studio to create it, I just basically told him this part of this is you having some creative freedom as well. You know what I mean? And so you guys were looking for that, some show that can do that. I'm going to give you that, you know what I mean? Because the creator has his vision. I have mine. We put that in the script as much as possible, but there are some other sound effects and things. If you want help, come to me, but also have creative freedom, you know what I mean, to come up with something. And if it's not kind of what we're thinking, then we'll redirect you. But we want you to be able to come up with these sounds and stuff of the bad guy's weapon, what it should sound like, you know what I mean? And and they had a Foley studio, so they would create some of these sounds themselves, and well, other than that, I would to give them references, or something create something, you know what I mean? I have faith and trust in you to create something that we're going to like or love, Yeah,
it shows to show all the different roles that people play, the different aspects of how people can just apply their expertise and their creativity.
Yeah.
Just kind of come together and just kind of, come on one accord, come to consensus. Maybe we need to tweak this or tweak that, or not. We nailed it with this. So I enjoyed that aspect of it as well.
Yeah.
So to get towards the end of here, so the question I'm about to ask you, and then we'll jump into the last portion. But yeah, the question I asked earlier, just about the transition into doing VO full time and working with these larger brands, and demand and the turnaround you have to get things done, and then share what you're willing to share about the financial aspect of it as well.
Yeah. So so transitioning into VO, so I ended up going full time because at Penna, there were some changes happening there, and I kind of saw it coming. You know what I mean? Based on things that were happening there. And I loved working there. It was great. I loved the people and everything. But I was starting to get a lot more voiceover clients, And then I kept thinking, what would it be if I actually devoted most of my time to this? What are the possibilities? You know what I mean? I was I got to give it a shot. And so as things were changing, and which ended up happening for sure, because they ended up, some other company ended up buying the company. And pretty much everybody was, gone after that. They got rid of everybody. So I kind of saw that coming. And then, so now I'm just doing VO full time. So that was a transition into that. And so a lot of these brands that I've worked with, had a pleasure to work with, a lot of them come from, my agents. And some of them I've actually found just on my own, through either networking, or there's a couple, they call it P2P sites, play-to-play sites for voice actors and voice buyers to get on there. And I'm only on one of them, but I've worked with some of them that I met that are on there as well. And honestly, I always feel as far as the turnaround that you mentioned, I don't have an issue with that, with turnaround, especially now that I'm full time.
Oh, but yeah, that makes sense.
Before, when I was doing, podcast producing or at NewsHour and working, I wasn't really working with really huge brands during that time. You know what I mean? Because I was still kind of trying to build myself back up again during that time. It started happening towards my tail end of working at Penn at the podcasting company, right? But that was always a struggle though, was I got to review this script, or I got to listen to this round of notes, or the notes that reply to this mix. But I also got this thing I got to record, you know what I mean, for this company, whatever. So there were just a lot of, I always be able to record something and get it to them on time, but there were a lot of late nights, working on it. And I still do work late, you know what I mean, at times. But but it was never something that really was super daunting to me. Like, I'm just gonna get it done. And so now, I'm working with some, bigger brands, and there are those times where it's like, you get like 4 or 5 things happening at once, and someone wants this at this time, this at this time, whatever. And I just organize myself to be able to get it done based on when it's due. And I still have auditions to do too. Like, you know what I mean? And so I always, for the most part, prioritize actual jobs over auditions, unless it's a big audition that pays really well. And depending on when it's
takes
due,
precedent.
Yeah, it takes precedent over probably a job that doesn't pay as well, but it's consistent though. But at the same time, there's always like a priority list that I kind of go through based on like when it's due, how much it is, and my bandwidth, right? And so for the most part, I always, get it done. And a lot of people have complimented me on my turnaround time, and that's one of the things I always, at least is my research that I found, that's no matter what industry you're in, as far as like being a voice buyer, turnaround time is always important to them. And so I always try to prioritize that. And so that's why, like on my website, like some of the testimonials that I have on there, like a lot of them say about he has good turnaround time. He was quick turning this around or whatever. Because I feel like if someone goes to my site and they see that multiple times, then they know like that's a part of who I am. Like I've been able to turn around stuff fairly quickly, right? And so the financial aspect of it, so I always tell people, if you were to talk to 10 voice actors and give them the same job, you probably get 10 different quotes. Like, you know what I mean? Especially when it comes to commercial, voiceover, because there are a lot of factors there as far as, how long it is, the piece, the commercial, is it a minute, 30 seconds, 15 seconds? Is it just a tag? How long they plan on using it for, the usage? Is it just for like a couple of weeks, months, a year or two? That the part of the country is it a national? Is it gonna be shown all over the world? Like there's so many different things like to factor in. And there are certain people in the video community that are really good at that I've leaned on. And also there's like a website that helps voice actors they're just suggested rates to help you kind of know that you're in the ballpark. Like they're not saying you need to charge this for that, because every project is different. So usually when people do come to me about like, rates, I ask these questions, because I have like a questionnaire on my website for them to like go through, fill out, and it helps me to kind of know, okay, because there's not a flat rate for like anything really. Like you can have that for certain things. Like if it's like an industrial, like I've done like these voice of God things for like fundraisers and stuff, like, you know what I mean? And that's just like a one-time event for that thing. Like, you know what I mean? So we agree on a rate, and then that's good for that. But then when it comes to like broadcast and commercials and like the usage and all that kind of stuff, it gets a bit more complicated. But also now that I have like, good representation, I can bring them in on that, and they can do that for me. Like, you know what I mean? Agents, my manager and all that, I can give it to them, and they can vouch for me based on industry standards and my worth of what I am as a talent, to be like, we think this is a good deal, and Torran, you should like, work with this or do this or whatever, or try to negotiate for me or whatever. But there are a lot of things that I get on my own, and I negotiate on my own. And there's some stuff I take on, a lot of stuff I walk away from. Like, you know what I mean? And so, the power of no is definitely not as daunting as it used to be when I first was starting out. Because when you first start out, you just want to do it. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
And you need the material too to show people like this is what I can do kind of thing. So you just do it. But like now I'm not at that point anymore where like, I say no. And because now it's also like a time thing too. Like, and so like, if this doesn't really fit my rates for what I think this is for, and they don't want to budge, or something in the contract is not right to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to spend time doing it because I could be doing something else that's more worth my time, that is more beneficial to me, and something more that I agree with. I'm not going to spend time doing it. So, I say no. And some people rework and they come back, and some don't. So that's fine. And that's just how the way the game goes. There's always new clients out there, new opportunities, new doors to walk through. And you just search and look for those. And then when those opportunities come, just knock it out of the park and have them coming back each time.
Yeah, that's being in demand enough to where you can say no is like the sweet spot of
Yeah.
of life, really.
Yeah.
Or like when you're not in scarcity, when you're living in abundance and you can walk away from things.
It's the freedom, man. Like it's
And yeah,
the
and it's
freedom.
peace. It's your peace, and you be at peace with it
Yeah,
too.
it's freedom. And there are other projects too that are like, they really speak to me based on whether it's a personal experience or something that I really believe in, that like, I'll do it for, something that's probably, I know I can get more out of this. But like, you know what I'm saying? But because I had conversations with them and I like them, I like their vision, I like what they're doing, like, that's fine. Like, I'll do it. And that's just like, that's just me as how I operate, like, and so like if you're big into like suicide prevention or something like that, because that really speaks to you or something like that. And then someone comes to you about something for that you want to do. And then, it's like this cause really means a lot to me. Right. And there are also people that do stuff like environmental stuff that really speaks to them. And it's like, yeah, like I'll do this. And like, I normally do this. Maybe I can't reach there, but like, how about we do this kind of thing? Everything's a conversation. And so I'm willing to always have that conversation. So, yeah.
Yeah. Anything can be negotiated.
Yeah.
But overall, man, like you just got a ton of experience in a lot of different areas, man, and you really went into depth. I got a lot out of it, and like that's my whole reason for doing this podcast, because I wish this was something that like was out there when I first started. Like saying, how the saying goes, but learning from other people's successes and mistakes can really help expedite your journey. So that's the main reason why I was excited about starting this. So and
it's exciting to listen to as well. Like I've heard some of the other ones you've done, you know what I mean? And so like, anybody listening, like you can always pick up, a little something from every guest that you have to forge in their own journey to go forth,
Okay, cool. Yeah, I definitely appreciate the rundown on all that, man. I don't know if you listened to the end of any previous episodes, but I got one final segment before I let you go, man. Just some audio related questions, just about your preferences, to kind of end on a lighter note and get to learn, more about you just as a person and your taste. Sure. And this sometimes the people's responses teach me a lot of things. Sometimes we might share some of the same taste, but a lot of people have our own particular taste. So
well, let's see what you learn from me. There's one thing that actually I'll let you go. Go ahead.
Okay. So the first question is favorite album of all time.
Yeah, so favorite album. I always go back and forth on this, and like I did hear you ask other people this, and because I've been in this phase for about a month now, I'm gonna say I do like 2014 Forest Hills Drive of J. Cole. Okay. Because he just had his 10th anniversary of that last year, and I was deep into that last month. And went to re-listen to it, and then he released like a couple extra songs that he made during that time on this new version of it. But there are so many other ones, you know what I mean? In my youth, it was Get Rich or Die Trying. Like, you know what I mean? I really love that album. I still do, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like TM 101, Jeezy, back in the day. I still love that album too. And then my very first album that I ever got, my mom gave me a cassette tape of Michael Jackson Thriller.
Thriller?
Yeah. And so like, I mean, there's so many other ones, but that's been playing in my head, 2014 Forest Hills Drive, for the past month. So I'm going to just stick with that one for now. Okay,
that's cool. Before I jump to the next question, you mentioned the 10th anniversary of that. He released like the anniversary vinyl and had the extra tracks on it. He also released like a audio series where it was like $10, but I actually listened to the whole thing. I think it was like 8 or so episodes. Man, I love anybody that knows me knows that just as much as I love the final product, I love the behind the scenes and the story of and the how to's, and that I'm good on behind it, like that satisfied that itch for me for
so that's what kind of got me really back into it. Like my buddy told me, is like, he came out with this audio series, like it's $10, like it's worth it, check it out. And so some of the $10 and listen to it, and it's the best $10 I've ever spent. Like you know what I mean, the 20 hours of the journey, and also just learning about where he was making certain albums and songs, because as a fan I have my own perspective of when I first heard the song or the album, and knowing where he was, you know what I mean, was very interesting. And just him trying to battle the whole thing with like, you know, being in a relationship but also having his fame and fortune, and like how hard it's to balance that and everything. And but you know, even still, like from my perspective as a fan and looking, you know, just on social media or whatever, like he seems still very grounded and very humble, but he admits to like some of these urges and temptations the rest. Like, you know,
because when 2014 Forest Hills Drive came out, like I had just kind of started my woke journey.
Okay.
So when I heard it, I was like, it took me, I was about 2-3 songs in, I said, oh yeah, he's there. Like I just knew, like I was like, he's tapped in, he's discovered it. Even though I didn't know, I had just started mine, but just some of the things that kind of resonated with me, I knew he had been on that journey and had arrived at kind of his destination for how he was going to live the rest of his life. So, all right. So next, favorite music producer.
Oh, music producer. I've always liked Timbaland. Yeah. One of my favorite clips, and everyone's seen it if you're a hip hop head, like, you know, when in Fade to Black with Jay-Z, when Jay-Z's trying to pick out like a song of his, like, you know what I mean? And he hears Dirt Off the Shoulders for the first time, and he plays that. And just watching him go crazy to his own beats, I always thought was hilarious.
Yeah. Right.
He looks into the camera and talk about how good he is and all that stuff. But now, like, you know, my first introduction to him was mainly, I think, was probably listening to Missy Elliott beats, like in the 90s. And I just discovered like almost every beat that I listened to, not every beat I listened to, but almost every beat that I heard, like of hers, or even just during that time was like a Timbo beat. And then so like, he's probably like one of my favorites, but I do like a lot of others. You know, Just Blaze is someone else that I like you know what I mean? And even before all of them, like Swiss Beats was probably like my first music producer that I liked, but like, I'm gonna say Timbaland.
Okay, go with Timbaland. Favorite film score?
Film score.
Or soundtrack?
Soundtrack? Oh, if we're gonna say
Score
soundtrack,
or
if I'm
soundtrack?
gonna say soundtrack, it has to be Space Jam.
Space
Yeah,
Jam. That's the new one first one.
Space Jam is like, I mean, I still listen to some of those songs on that today. Like, you know what I mean? Like that, what's that one they had? The Hit 'em High song with like Be Real and LL Cool J and Coolio. Like it just takes you back to like the 90s and that time. And like, yeah, that album or that soundtrack is dope.
Yeah, I gotta go back and I think I've listened to like the promotional singles from that, but I haven't like really listened to like the entire soundtrack.
It's been a while for me too. Like it's on a couple
so
select songs, but like it still holds weight for me.
Okay, yeah, check it out, man. All right, last one. Favorite TV theme song.
Favorite TV theme song. Well, I guess I gotta go with Fresh Prince. This is the thing I was gonna tell you about, because I think that's your favorite show, right?
Yeah. I think that's what I said.
So like so that's so my thing for, because I'm not really a big karaoke person, but I have a lot of friends like to do karaoke, you know, and so I'm always just sitting back chilling, like, come on, Torran, do a song. Like, nah, I'm good. But if I do a song, it's always like a TV theme song, because they're short and usually everybody knows them.
Yeah, memorable.
Yeah,
easy to remember.
Exactly. And I usually always do Fresh Prince.
Okay, I'm gonna have to. It's been a long time since I've done karaoke, but I'm gonna steal that tip. I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna go with this TV.
Yeah,
theme
Family
song
Matters,
next time.
Full House, like do them. They're quick and everybody knows them.
That's a hack right there. Appreciate that. Well, yeah, I think that's it, man. Like I mentioned before we got into the last segment, I appreciate you sharing your experience, not only in audio, even though, you know, that's the basis of my platform, but I know it's a lot of people over here who just have a passion and love, affinity for production and media, storytelling in general.
Definitely,
So I think they can get a lot out of it, in all aspects of your experience, and appreciate willing to jump on and have this conversation, and actually, you know, taking a listen to previous episodes just to get a feel. for what I got going on, man. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're doing your thing, man. Keep it up. And definitely going to keep on listening and see, what other interesting people you have on and even myself taking nuggets from their journeys.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, yeah, I think that's a wrap, man, for everybody listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have not, please go back and listen to previous episodes. For future episodes, just stay tapped in what you're doing. I'm trying to make this thing is become as big and grow as big as possible. So I appreciate you all tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you for joining us on today's episode. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave us a review. If you'd like to work with me or connect, please go to soundbysid.com and schedule a call. There you can also check out the full list of productions I've worked on. If you'd like to connect on social media, my handle is soundbysid.com on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm Sidney Evans on LinkedIn. Don't forget to follow Beyond the Threshold on Instagram as well. I'll catch you on the next episode.